daily fears explode.
Hello and welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live today on October 30th, 2005. I am your host, Russell Glasser, and my co-host this week is my sister, Keryn Glasser. We are sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a non-profit organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We have weekly meetings every Sunday at not at Crescent City Beignets. I'm sorry to inform you that Crescent City Beignets will be closing its doors. In the interim, we're going to be choosing a temporary alternate meeting spot of Schlotsky's Deli, same place that we have our monthly board meeting. That's Schlotsky's Deli on 218 South Lamar. It's south of the bridge. We are definitely going to be meeting at Schlotsky's Deli next week. And hopefully we're going to decide whether we will make that permanent or whether we can all agree on another place to go to. So if you're planning to go to Crescent City Beignets next week, don't go to Schlotsky's Deli, 218 South Lamar. And with that aside, I've lost my place, which is just great. Anyway, those start at 11:30, and they are open to any atheist or atheist-friendly people. You don't need to be a member to come. That's every Sunday except for, and it is next Sunday, but it's not the third Sunday of each month when we have our lecture series at the Austin History Center on 9th and Guadalupe. Those start at 12:30. The next lecture will be November 20th. It will be Renee Hellman of American Atheists, and her topic will be American Atheists Organization, its past, present, and future, and the benefits of affiliation. Other regular events include Godless Gamers every Monday night at 7 o'clock at my house, and tomorrow night, game night, will coincide with Halloween, and I'll be taking my kid around the block, but everybody else is still free to come and play games, and I'll be back later in the evening. You can check the website, www.atheist-community.org, for information on how to contact me and get directions, or you can email tv@atheist-community.org. Also, Atheist Happy Hour on Thursdays at 7:30 at Antonio's Tex-Mex on the southbound feeder of I-35, just south of 183. You can check the website calendar for information on regular and special events. We also have a regular internet audio show called The Non-Profits every Saturday on freethoughtradio.com. The show is hosted by Jeff D. Co-hosted
every Saturday?
It's on every Saturday, but it's only live every other Saturday. Okay. I never mentioned that because I'd like people to listen to it every week and listen to the reruns. It's hosted by Jeff D., co-hosted by Dennis LeBay, and also features Matt Dillahunty and myself. The next live show will be next week. There wasn't a live one yesterday. There will be one on November 5th. Saturday, November 5th. The ACA has a board meeting on the second Sunday of every month before the regular meeting, and we are meeting at Schlotsky's Deli on 218 South Lamar, south of the bridge, which by an extraordinary coincidence happens to be, remember, where we're having our Sunday meeting next week, not Crescent City Beignets. During the board meetings, ACA members are all welcome to come and sit in on board meetings, but only board members may vote. And the next board meeting will be Sunday, November 13th. If you enjoy the program today and you would like to come and meet us, we regularly meet for dinner after the show. Currently, we're meeting at Fresh Choice, located at 9761 Great Hills Trail, behind the Arboretum. To get there from downtown, go north on Research 183, just past 360, and turn left on Great Hills Trail. Fresh Choice is a big salad bar and buffet. As with our other events, atheists and atheist-friendly people are all welcome to come join us, but as usual, don't preach to us. If you're there to convert us, then you'd be better off calling or emailing this show. We will all be there after the show, arriving at around 6:45, so come hang out. That's all for regular announcements. We have a few special announcements today. Tuesday. We have a big debate between ACA members. My sister is making sarcastic faces at me. Big debate between ACA member Paul Wilson and a Catholic theology student on the proposition, is there an afterlife? As it says on the screen right now, you can check out Dionysium.com. And if you're listening to the audio stream, that's Dionysium.com to get more details on the debate. The debate will occur in the Alamo Cinema Draft House on South Lamar, so try to figure out where that is before you come. And it starts at 7? Anyone? Does anyone know? 7:30. 7:30. Between Paul Wilson and a Catholic theology student. Check that out. I'd like to. I'm hoping I can get a babysitter for that night. There's an election coming up, and we don't tell you to go vote or what to vote for because we don't do that. We're a nonprofit. However, I will mention that there's an election coming up on November 8th. And there's a proposition on it that is interesting to people who are not into the whole religious right thing. Proposition 2 states, quote, "The constitutional amendment providing that marriage in this state consists only of the union of one man and one woman, and prohibiting this state or a political subdivision of this state from creating or recognizing any legal status identical or similar to marriage." So it's an anti-gay marriage amendment, and I've explained on this show before that officially the ACA has no opinion on gay marriage. However, we've discussed it at length, and basically we mostly agree that the only arguments for outlawing gay marriage are of a religious nature. Just give it some thought. I've also been informed that there's a libertarian argument, but the libertarian argument is basically all marriage is bad. We shouldn't have any of it, and we shouldn't try to fix marriage at all, including by making it open to gay people. There are some libertarians in the ACA. I'm not one of them, but in general, we don't agree with making a special statement that outlaws gay marriage. So, if you are interested, just remember that the deadline for voting is November 8th. Let's see, I believe that wraps up the announcements. Keryn?
Yay! Okay. So I when I'm not on the show, and I haven't been on the show for a while, it's good to be back, I've been watching other episodes of the show and taking notes about subject ideas that come up. A lot of times, in fact, almost every show, somebody will call into our show and ask us what is the difference between atheism and agnosticism. And our canned response to that is, the Latin prefix a means without. Theism means God, and Gnosticism means knowledge. So most sane, rational human beings on the planet are agnostic. They're either agnostic theists or agnostic atheists, which means that they either believe there is a God or they do not believe that there is a God. There is an alternative to agnosticism, which is knowledge, and this is what I'm going to be talking about on the show today. There's a word called, a very big, long, fancy, expensive word called epistemology.
That's a big word. Can you say
big word.
Epistemology, boys and girls?
Epistemology is the branch of philosophy that deals with the nature, origin, and scope of knowledge. This is a really big subject. I've been accused frequently in the past of tackling really big subjects, so here we go. I'm going to try not to babble too much and not to read too much. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to call into the show after I'm done with my little spiel. Knowledge is, so epistemology is the branch of philosophy that deals with knowledge and how it relates to the similar notions of truth and belief. There are... when you're defining knowledge, it's important to distinguish between the concepts of knowing that, in other words, reason, let's say, and knowing how, in other words, experience. When you, for example, are talking about something like swimming or dancing, you can know what it is. Swimming, you can know what a front stroke is. You oscillate your legs back and forth, and you use your arms in a circular motion, but you don't necessarily know how if you have never been in the water and had never swum before. Swam. Anyway, so you might be able to describe what swimming is without actually knowing how to swim. On the other hand, if you do know how to swim, you might have been swimming your whole life, but you don't know how to describe it necessarily. So that's the difference between knowing that and knowing how. The difference between reason and experience.
It's like if you have a sense of humor, you can explain it all you want to a person who doesn't have a very good sense of humor, and they might even understand conceptually what you're saying, but they won't get your jokes.
Right. Or explaining the concept of a horizon to somebody who is blind. Explaining the concept of color. They might understand the concept, but they'll never really understand it until they see it for themselves.
Or it's like those annoying 3D pictures that were really popular in the malls that everybody would sit there and explain how to see them, and you could stare at them and say, yeah, I know I'm supposed to unfocus my eyes. Doesn't work.
Plato used the term techne, or skill, to define the knowledge of how to do something, and episteme to define just the knowledge of something. In Spanish, they actually distinguish by using the difference between conocer and saber. I think conocer is knowing how to do something, and saber is just knowing something, but I could have that backwards. I've only taken Spanish 101. Knowledge and belief. When you're describing the difference between knowledge and belief, there are two kinds of ways that people use the word belief. One of them is the sort of touchy-feely, I believe in you, which is really more about trusting in something. But when philosophers talk about belief, they're usually talking about just thinking that something is true. In order to know that something is true, you have to also think that something is true. So it's really impossible to know that something is true, but believe in something else. So you can't
know something without first believing it.
Right, you can't know something without first believing it. You can't say, well, I know this is true, but I believe this other thing anyway. So, in other words, for something to count as knowledge, it must also therefore be true. Similarly, two people can believe that things are mutually contradictory, but they can't know that two things are mutually contradictory. For example, I could be an atheist and I could assert that I don't believe that there's God, and somebody else could be a theist and they could assert that they believe that there is a God. But I couldn't assert that I know that there is a God, and at the same time somebody else will assert that they know that there is not a God. One of us is wrong, and therefore the belief or non-belief of God is it's just that, it's a belief. You can't, a lot of people will call into our show and accuse us of saying, well, how do you know that there's a God? You can't prove that there's a God. You're right, we can't prove that there's a God or that there is no God. We believe that there is a God or that there is no God. And most people that you'd meet in the world that assert that they know whether or not there is or is not a God are not rational people.
Or they may have never heard of epistemology. I mean, there are people who insist that they know there's no God, and they're wrong, but that doesn't mean they're crazy.
Well, okay, and this is actually going to skip ahead into another concept that's going to come up, but I'm going to put that off for just a second. Okay. So Plato argues that one must have reason, in order for a belief to be true and justified, Plato defines knowledge as justified true belief. And in order for one to say that a belief is true, they have to have a reason, or they have to be able to justify their belief. one cannot be said to know something just because they believe it, and that belief is subsequently turns out to be true. In other words, if you go through your whole life believing that there's a God, and you die and go to heaven and meet God, you're like, haha, I was right all along. See, I really did know there was a God. No, you didn't know that there was a God, because all along you could have just as easily been wrong and died and it turned out that there was no God. You still, even if the end result turns out to be true, you still only ever believed that there was a God. Knowledge, therefore, is distinguished from true belief by its justification. So if you have knowledge of something in your lifetime, it has to be justified. I guess I've already said that, really. I would say that, in other words, faith is believing in something without just justification. So the problem of defining knowledge is that it's been taken to... hold on, let me collect my thoughts. For most of philosophical history, knowledge was taken to mean that belief was justified as true to an absolute certainty. Any less justified beliefs were called mere probable opinions. The notion that belief had to be justified to a certainty after a while lost its favor. And one example of this is there are situations...
And today we tell people on the show that we pretty much don't know anything for a certainty.
Yeah.
Everything is probable opinion. Some of it is really, really probable opinion, and we call that we know pretty much.
Yeah. It's like as Socrates says, the only thing you can really know is that you don't know. You can't ever necessarily prove knowledge. I'm going to get into this again later, but there's certain things that we know to be true. They're very, very limited. So an example of this is situations in which a believer has a true belief that is justified to a reasonable degree, but not to a certainty. The believer does not, in that case, the believer does not have knowledge. So to a reasonable degree, most people would agree that the world is round, that you can't say in history that anybody ever knew to a certainty that the world was flat. Back when they believed that the world is flat, probably a lot of people said, I know that the world is flat. They were proven wrong, which means, in fact, they never really knew that the world was flat. They just believed it to be flat.
Because to know something, it has to be true.
It has to be true. So, we like to say now that we know that the world is round. But again, this is just we know it to a reasonable degree. We can't be certain of it because, abstractly, we could all be living in the Matrix.
Yes, there's that analogy again.
Yay.
God bless the Matrix for giving everybody an understandable analogy for a philosophical concept.
Except that there is no God, so we can't actually bless him for giving that to us.
Right, but in the Matrix, there is no real world. I hope I'm not spoiling a 6-year-old movie now. There is no reality because everybody is actually a brain in a vat. And has reality fed to them through a tube. And there is a reality, but it's totally different from the one they are familiar with.
So it's, in other words, what we're experiencing now is virtual reality. And we haven't even ever experienced actual reality because we're in the Matrix.
Right,
anyway.
and the real reality could have a flat Earth.
Right.
And different laws of physics.
Yeah, okay. So when you're discussing knowledge, there's two ways that people classify knowledge. There's a priori knowledge, which is knowledge that is gained or justified by reason exclusively. And there's a posteriori knowledge, which references to knowledge based on experience. So, a lot of times, atheists frequently rely exclusively on a priori knowledge. We like to say that we don't believe in God because it doesn't fit logically. It doesn't really make sense. You can't really apply reason to it. A lot of people will then call into the show and say, I can prove to you that there is a God because I had this experience one time where I asked God to show me a sign, and then I walked into my garage and I stumbled across this Bible that my mother gave me when I was 6, and I thought I'd lost it. And so that was my sign to prove to me that there was a God. That's called a posteriori knowledge, which is knowledge based on experience. Knowledge, you say that you know that there's a God because you had some experience which you interpreted to be true. Not because of reason, but because of the experience that you had. That really brings in the concepts of perception, of interpreting what you perceive, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the field of knowledge most often suggested to have a priori status are logic and mathematics. So the only two things we can ever really say that we know to be true are mathematics. 2 plus 2 will always equal 4. If you understand the definition of 2, and you understand the definition of 4, and you understand the definition of plus, then 2 plus 2 will always equal 4. Okay. So a lot of epistemological philosophy has been concerned with seeking ways to justify knowledge statements. Now, there's 2 ways that you can justify knowledge statements. There's rational ways and there's irrational ways. Rational ways of justifying experience, justifying knowledge experience, one of them is nihilism.
Which you've done a topic on before.
Which I've done a topic on before.
Just to say that we aren't that.
We aren't nihilists, yeah. So nihilists pretty much posit there can be no justification for knowledge claims. Really, we don't know anything. There's no such thing as existence. We can't prove anything. There's no point to anything. This statement is considered irrational because really it's self-contradictory. Basically what they're saying is, I know that knowledge is impossible. I mean, you can't know that knowledge is impossible if knowledge is impossible. And therefore you either know it or you don't. So it's irrational. Another irrational way of justifying knowledge is mysticism. And mysticism is basically believing that something is true based on emotions. This is also called epistemological mysticism, which is basically believing in the existence of something such as God because you want God to exist. You want it to be true. One example when we were discussing in the car, I said, I believe that I will never die because I can't imagine the world without me in it. So I believe I will never die because I don't want to die. I believe there is a God because I want to believe that there is God because the idea that there might not be a God is scary, and therefore there must be a God.
Right, and you ought to stress, that doesn't mean there isn't a God. There could be a God. You could die, you could go your whole life thinking, well, I sure want there to be a God, so I guess I'll believe in one. And then it could turn out you're right when you die. Mm-hmm. But you didn't know that you were right. You just believed it out of convenience, and then you happened to be right. So then it wouldn't be knowledge.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of people will try and define God or define their faith by saying it just feels right. It just feels like it's true. And this is the concept of mysticism, is believing something based on how it feels. The alternative to that, of course, is believing something based on deductive logic or scientific reason. Your rational ways of justifying statements, a lot of people who go through life trying to rationalize everything are frequently labeled as skeptics. And skeptics accept the validity of reason and therefore try and present logical arguments for all their cases. One trap that a lot of times skeptics will fall into is that if you try and ask for the justification for any statement of knowledge, and then the justification takes the form of another statement, and then you ask for the justification of that statement, you come up with a regressive argument. So in other words, a lot of times people will say, they'll call into the show and they'll say, how can you say there's no God? Where did we come from? And we'll say, well, we came from our parents. They had sex and gave birth to us. Well, where did they come from? Oh, they came from their parents. And they'll try and prove to us there had to be a God somewhere because everything came from something. The problem with this, again, is that it's self-contradictory. You can't say that, you can prove God because everything came from something and therefore that something must be God, because you're contradicting yourself. Either everything came from something or everything didn't come from something. And God, if everything came from God, then where did God come from, essentially? And if you say, oh, God didn't come from anything, where God is basically the one exception to the rule, that's directly self-contradictory right there. Alternatively, some people say that some knowledge statements don't require justification because they have some kind of special status, like God does, and this is called foundationalism. One can also avoid the regression process if one supposes that the assumption that a knowledge statement can only be supported by another knowledge statement is simply misguided. So, an alternate to foundationalism is coherentism, which holds basically that a statement is justified if it coheres with all other knowledge statements in the system. Does that make sense? Am I?
Sure.
Okay.
It's got to be consistent.
It's got to be consistent.
With the other stuff you believe.
Yeah. So, in other words, it's not necessarily coherent to say, coherent or consistent to say, everything came from something and therefore everything came from God, because...
Or you can believe God is omnipotent, God is omniscient, God is all good, and then when you throw in there is evil into the mix, then that kind of screws with things.
Right.
I mean, you can believe all those things, but at that point you become inconsistent.
Right.
And it doesn't matter which one you throw out, just one of them's got to go.
Then I want to not sound too much like I'm reading directly from a script, but this is pretty thick stuff again. So some statements, there exist statements that don't need justification, because if you understand the definition of something, it doesn't need justification. Okay, let me read it because it makes more sense. Some statements don't need any justification once one understands the meaning. And the example of that is, my father's brother is my uncle. If you understand the definition of the word uncle, that statement is already justified without relying on any other statement. Philosophers call such statements analytic. And again, mathematics is an example of an analytic statement. If you understand the definition of 2 and you understand the definition of 4 and the definition of plus, then saying that 2 plus 2 equals 4 doesn't need any further justification, because the meaning explains it all. The way people scrutinize analytic arguments is basically by saying that, well, yeah, they're true, but they don't really tell you anything new. They don't really, what's the point of them? They're true. They don't express any new thoughts. Okay, so there are. Okay, good. You have the number up. There are different kinds of.
Should I point out? This is a live call-in show. If you're interested in talking about epistemology or any other subject, then the phone number for this show should be appearing on your screen right now. If you don't see it, don't get confused. You are watching a rerun. If you do see it, you can call. Go on.
And now we have all 3 lines lit up. Yay!
Okay, so you can't call, but...
Okay. I'm happy to take calls and then go back to the rest of this thick stuff later if you're interested. I was just about to go into different kinds of epistemological theories. 3.
Okay. Can you abbreviate them a little bit?
Well, okay, there's different kinds of epistemological theories. I wasn't going to discuss all of them, but I was going to discuss empiricism, realism, representationalism, pragmatism, and skepticism. basically, imperialism holds that our ideas... Empiricism?
Imperialism is the theory that we should go and take over other countries so that we can rule the world.
Yeah, that's different.
But that would be a ridiculous thing to do.
Empiricism just holds that any ideas and theories that are presented need to be tested against reality. It is very driven by science. Realism is also called common sense realism, is the belief that there is a real external world, and it has its foundation in causation, basically saying realism, okay, an example of it is an object is there, an object being there causes us to see it. So we don't see something. Well, okay. An example of that is like a room is still there once we exit it. A room is there, we see it because it's there. That doesn't mean that when we leave it goes away.
It's sort of the if a tree falls in the forest kind of thing.
Yeah, it still makes a sound. If you understand the definition of a tree and a forest and sound.
And sound, which is waves going through the air, doesn't matter if they hit an ear. Right.
It doesn't matter if we hear it or not. And then, of course, you mix in the concept of perception, which kind of screws everything up. Some people believe that there isn't really any such thing as reality because everybody who perceives whatever is going to perceive it differently, is going to interpret it differently, and therefore there isn't any... and this is called representationalism. I won't go into pragmatism.
Sounds kind of like postmodernism, actually.
Okay. So, and then basically skepticism, which is what atheists are frequently accused of being.
And proudly accept that label.
And proudly accept it, is the practical stance that one should not accept the veracity of claims until solid evidence is produced. I would posit that the opposite of skepticism is gullibility.
Okay. I'll buy that.
I guess that's enough for now. The only thing left that was really presented is just to illustrate that it really is difficult to, Socrates says, I know that I do not know. That's the only thing you really can know, is that you don't know. And a good reason for this is that it's just really hard to define knowledge. Because in order for knowledge to exist, it has to be true. And in order for it to be true, you have to believe that it's true. And in order to believe that it's true, you have to be able to justify that it's true. But a lot of philosophers who have discussed this have also thrown in an X value. Just because you believe something to be true and you can justify it still doesn't quite add up to ultimate knowledge. Because you can justify the belief that we know that the world is round and we're living on it, but we might still be living in the matrix, which is that X value. And a lot of philosophers have written a lot of different books about what that X value is.
Well, everything you think you know with justification is based on the other things you think you know. And if they're all wrong, then, or if a bunch of them are wrong, then you could be wrong about a whole lot of them without realizing it.
And there have been a lot of books that have written by different philosophers trying to define what that X value is, and some other philosopher will come across and contradict them and come up with a reason why that can't be true. So, if you can't really define knowledge for sure, then there really just can't be any knowledge.
Right. It happens all the time in science, and theists criticize that without realizing that it also happens all the time in religion.
Exactly. People try and say you can't be an atheist because science has all these gaps. Religious theories have all these gaps too. So if you choose to believe in religion, good for you, but it just doesn't work for me. I choose to believe in science because I'm a skeptic, and I need reason, I need logic. It makes more sense to me. I need epistemology. So there's my spiel on epistemology.
Good on you.
Let's move into callers.
Okay. Callers who currently have no name. We have full lines right now.
Full lines, no names, no subjects.
The caller seems,
studio is asleep.
Wait a minute.
Wake up.
Let me see if it's the studio and not. Oh, my computer is locked. That's lovely. Okay. Can somebody can somebody shout the name of the first caller and what line they're on?
Oh no, our technology has failed us. What are we going to do?
I vote we go loot.
Kerry, line 2.
Okay, we're going to Kerry on line 2. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Gary?
Hey, what do you...
Kerry.
Gary or Kerry?
Kerry.
Kerry. Okay.
Hi.
So what do you know?
That I do not know.
I want to chime in on today's topic, but can I clear up a misstatement or a misunderstanding that was expressed earlier?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's about how tough it is when people are always misunderstanding you anyway, and then it gets worse if people misstate your position. The hardcore libertarian position is not against marriage per se; it's against the government licensing of it.
Sorry.
Okay.
And that's an understandable error. A lot of people make that error.
Right.
So, now Descartes said, I think
Descartes.
Okay. I was saying it in Texas.
Okay.
In Texas. Anyway, he said, I think, therefore I am. So do I really know that? And can I really know I'm an agnostic?
Yeah. And actually, that's in this. I got my whole lecture today from Wikipedia just by looking up the word epistemology.
How do people find Wikipedia on the net? That's a great resource.
I think it's
I love it.
Wikipedia.com.
But it actually I think it's Wikipedia.org.
Okay.
It exemplifies
Google
the
it.
idea of not really knowing anything, because everything on Wikipedia is based on the input of a whole bunch of different people who all disagree with each other and fight over their entries. It's very interesting and quite surprising how good the results turn out.
Yeah.
So if we start with I think, therefore I am, is it then possible to, I guess this is almost just a verbal thing, but is it possible to know something within a context in which you specify the context, or stipulate the context, like 2 + 2 = 4 for 2 + 2 = 4, for example?
Okay. What about it?
Is that a question?
Well, I'm just throwing out that I in general agree with the agnostic position. That you basically try to keep an open mind. But is it possible to know at least some things, like I think, therefore I am? Is it possible to know that?
Well, yeah, and this, okay, so this did go in a little bit into Descartes.
I think it's a good bet that I think, therefore I am.
Right, and the reason they said in this, under defining rationalism, it says that the epitome of the rationalist view is Descartes' statement, I think, therefore I am, in which the skeptic is invited to consider that the mere fact that he doubts this claim. So anybody that's trying to say, well, that's not true, you can't say that. Well, the fact that he doubts this claim implies that there is a doubter. So in order to doubt that I think, therefore I am, implies that you must be there in order to think that it's not true.
The what has to be there?
The doubter.
Oh, the doubter has to be there. Well, the doubter can be there, but and people, of course, will say all kinds of things. Some of them can be very absurd. But don't we have at least this hardcore starting point that says, I think, therefore I am?
Right, exactly. So if you're trying to say, I think that therefore I am is not true, and I could be thinking but I could not really exist, well, in order to even think that, you must exist in order to be there to think it.
So
I've heard lots of philosophical conundrums, like, what if you're just a character in somebody else's dream, like they told Alice in Through the Looking Glass. If the king were to wake up, then you'd just go out bang like a candle.
Well,
I think it's pretty well accepted that you have to start with I think, therefore I am, because you have to start somewhere.
Right. Yeah, so I can be an agnostic about everything else, and here's another one of those little funny little conundrums, I guess, is can I be an agnostic about being an agnostic? Can I know that?
Sure.
Anyway, so, but anyway, for people who say you got to have some kind of firm foundation, some kind of starting point, who might react in fear to considering anything else, or letting go of letting go of unjustified or unexamined beliefs because of fear, you do have a place to start, which is I think, therefore I am, and then that at least you've got that. Everything else you can build from there. And I know you got a full bank of callers there.
Of course, Descartes also followed up, I think, therefore I am, with a whole bunch of really bad logical inferences.
Yeah,
which,
I know.
which led him to conclude, of course there's a God.
Well, yeah, but he didn't make the logical connections. Or maybe one of your callers will call in and say, but you guys overlooked this. Here's the logic. But I don't see it so far, so I'm agnostic.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks for your
calling.
feedback. Can I plug my really, really bad joke, which is my favorite joke?
Please.
Okay. Descartes walks into a bar. The bartender said, "Would you like a drink?" And he says, "I think not." And he disappears. Nobody ever gets that joke, so I had to plug it.
Well, since you've spent 40 minutes outlining the groundwork, I hope some people get
Yay.
it.
Okay.
Shall we go on to more callers? Our computer is coming back, but in the meantime, and now for something completely different.
Now for something completely different.
People who follow our show are probably aware that...
We are a bunch of nerds. I'm sorry, that's not what you were going to say.
We are, though, especially us two. But I was going to say that you're probably aware that there's a trial going on in Dover, Pennsylvania over whether it's constitutional for the school board to require that biology teachers also mention ID, intelligent design, which you're probably also aware we on the show very strongly feel is ridiculous because it's not science. It could be right, but it's not science because it's intentionally worded in this sort of weaselly way to not have to actually prove anything. So there's this great editorial in Slate, which we will be shamelessly ripping off this week, by William Salatan, who noticed the similarity between Michael J. Behe's testimony, and he's the big biochemist nerd in the intelligent design movement, and a certain dialogue by Monty Python. And Keryn and I are huge Monty Python nerds from childhood. I owned both of the All the Words books from Monty Python's Flying Circus, and we are going to be performing a dramatic reenactment of a particular Monty Python sketch that I liked.
So, you say you have a new theory about the Brontosaurus.
Can I just say here, Chris, for one moment, that I have a new theory about the Brontosaurus?
Exactly. Well, what is it?
What is my theory?
Yes.
What is my theory that it is? Well, Chris, you may well ask me, what is my theory?
I am asking.
Good for you. My word, yes. Well, Chris, what is it that it is, this theory of mine? Well, this is what it is. My theory that I have, that is to say, which is mine, is mine.
Yes, I know it's yours. What is it?
Well, what is my theory? This is it. My theory that belongs to me is as follows. This is how it goes. The next thing I'm going to say is my theory. Ready?
Yes.
This theory goes as follows. It begins now. All brontosauruses are thin at one end and much, much thicker in the middle, and then thin again at the far end. Now, we will move from this to another reenactment of the courtroom scene in Dover earlier this week, where Keryn will be playing the role of prosecuting attorney Eric Rothschild, and I will be playing the role of Michael Behe.
Please describe the mechanism that intelligent design proposes for how complex biological structures arose.
Well, the word mechanism can be used in many ways. When I was referring to intelligent design, I meant that we can perceive that in the process by which a complex biological structure arose, we can infer that intelligence was involved.
Well, what is the mechanism that intelligence design proposes?
And I wonder, am I permitted to know what I replied to your question the first time?
I don't think I got a reply, so I'm asking you. You've made this claim here. Intelligent design theory focuses exclusively on the proposed mechanism of how complex biological structures arose. And I want to know, what is the mechanism that intelligent design proposes for how complex biological structures arose?
Again, it does not propose a mechanism in the sense of a step-by-step description of how these structures arose, but I can infer that in that mechanism, in the process by which these structures arose, an intelligent cause was involved. And according to this editorial, it goes on and on for several pages after that. Thank you very much. Okay, computer's coming back, but we still need somebody to shout out the name of the next caller. Anyone?
Anyone?
Right.
Anyone? Bueller?
Judge? Judge.
Hello. Hey, how's it going?
Hi.
Happy Halloween.
You too.
What's going on?
Not much.
As a matter of fact, I just turned on the TV right now. Just turned it on, and I heard y'all singing.
Singing?
Y'all seem very happy. I see you got your Halloween costume on. I'm just joking. But, so, like, what's going on?
I'm going as an atheist.
What's going on? Tell me something good.
Something good.
How was your day? What did you experience anything today? Anything out of the ordinary?
I can't say particularly out of the ordinary.
Chat?
Okay, question is, just want to let you know that you don't fool around behind God, with God about, don't fool around with God, because he'll send you, he'll burn you, and hell is a very hot place to go.
Heaven's a hot place to go?
Hell.
Hell is a hot place to go. Let me take this one.
It's very hot, very hot. See you in hell,
All right.
Thank
you.
Okay.
Bye. All right, so this is my favorite new argument. This is like the newest thing I think I've come up with a canned response for.
For Pascal's wager.
For Pascal's wager. A lot of people will call in, or people that we talk to will say, well, you should believe in God because if you believe in God and there turns out to not be one, then you've lost nothing. But if you believe in God and there turns out to be one, then you get, eternal bliss, heaven, presence of God,
Yes, and of course if Jeff D were here, he would say, how dare you threaten me?
But we're not Jeff D, so we're not going to say that. Okay.
That's what we love about having different co-hosts.
My alternative argument to Pascal's wager, I always have trouble remembering that. Okay, Pascal's wager is, if there is no God, okay, if you believe in a God and there turns out not to be one, then you've gone to heaven. But if you believe in God and there is no God, and you live your life in the practice of God, then, in my opinion, you've lost everything. Here's really how atheists live their life. Because a lot of theists, they'll spend every Sunday in church. They'll be pious. They'll spend a lot of time in prayer. They will practice self-denial from things that God has decided are a sin. And this includes, sex and drinking and pot, partying. And I'm not telling all the children out there in the world that it's okay to do all that stuff. But I'm saying you're okay. You have one chance at living. If there is no God, this is it. This is what you have. We're not focusing on an afterlife here. We're focusing on our one chance to do everything right now. If you spend your entire life in piety and self-denial, then you've lost everything. You don't get a second chance. So, would you like to?
Okay. Well, I think this question also touches on epistemology, because that guy seemed pretty darn certain that he knew that there was a hell, when in fact he's just saying that because that's what he's been told by his preacher.
Right.
If he'd lived in Saudi Arabia and believed in Islam, then what his mullah would be telling him is that all Christians are going to go to hell, which means that casting your lot with a particular religion isn't a rescue from hell, because you could very well be believing in the wrong religion, which is just as bad in the end as believing believing atheism.
Plus, as much as you try and scare us into believing in God by threatening that we're going to hell, it really doesn't work if you don't believe in hell in the first place.
Right. We're not scared.
Yeah, but thanks for bringing up the subject of Pascal's wager.
Yes, because we never hear that one.
Don't be cynical.
I'm sorry. Chris?
Yeah.
Hi.
I just want to know, why don't you believe in that?
Because we haven't really been given enough evidence that
So what is
causes
your
us.
belief then?
I believe in, the Matrix notwithstanding. Yes.
Did a whole
Did you watch the
half-hour.
first half hour of the show?
Okay.
Okay. I'd recommend
This
rewinding
always
your
happens.
TiVo and watching the does it always happen when I'm on, or does it just always happen?
No, it always
Sunday
happens.
football
People
time.
call in right
Okay.
after a topic.
I'd recommend rewinding your TiVo and watching the first half hour. But essentially, I believe in the things that I can experience. No.
Yeah,
I believe in the things that are
believe in
logical.
things you have evidence for.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Like, for instance, do you believe in leprechauns?
No.
Do you know that there's no leprechauns?
No.
So there could be leprechauns, but you don't have a good reason to believe in leprechauns. Same with God.
Right.
That's it.
And fairies and unicorns. It's not that we don't believe in God because we hate him or think he's a bad guy or we're rebelling against our parents. I mean, I'd like to believe in unicorns too, but I just don't have enough evidence.
Well, have you tried to believe in it?
Yeah.
Sure.
You've been to church and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah.
I've been to temple.
I
I've
was
been to-
bat mitzvahed and confirmed and spent a lot of time.
Well, that's cool. You're entitled to, your opinion like
Thank
that.
you.
And,
as are you.
Absolutely.
I was just curious to see what atheists were,
Great.
And you're entitled to your opinion, but people that say you're gonna go to hell, I believe in God, but when Judgment Day does come, I believe if you believe in them, you go into the light then maybe. But I believe there is an afterlife because I've been to Mexico and I've seen ghosts before, and that's kind of real scary. But
Was it La Llorona?
huh? No, it was actually in Santa Rosa.
Okay.
It was real scary. I mean, it was an
Okay.
experience for me, but
Yeah.
I mean, y'all entitled to believe what y'all believe in. So God bless you. Y'all
All
take
right.
care.
Thank you for calling in.
Thanks. Bye.
And that is a good example of a posteriori knowledge.
Oh, wow. Good
plug.
retrofit into
Thank
the topic. Wow.
Yeah, and I think that's the real important thing about our show. I really like what that guy had to say. He didn't understand, so he asked a question, and when we gave him an example that was satisfactory, he respected our belief. It's not that, he didn't necessarily agree with it, but he respected it. I want to make up a new card here that says, familiarity breeds respect. Because we respect your right to believe in your religion for whatever reason that you do that, as long as you don't, do bad things. And we're not trying necessarily to force you all to be atheists. We just want you to, respect that we are atheists and that that doesn't necessarily make us evil people.
Right. I'm being hit over the head with the announcement that we will be going to Fresh Choice after the show. So if you are an atheist or an atheist-friendly person, show up at around 6:45, Fresh
Actually, it's
Choice. And you
more
can
like we're being
hang out
hit
with-
across the front side.
Yeah. 9761 Great Hills Trail is the address. It's north of the Arboretum, and today is October 30th, 2005. So if you're not watching a rerun, come hang out.
Okay.
The next caller is Dan.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, my name is Ben.
I just said that.
Oh,
Hi.
I said Dan. Hey, I got a question for you, but first I gotta say I've only seen the show a couple of times, and I feel for you guys. The callers you guys
Why-
did are quite religious fanatics, and you have very interesting and thought-provoking questions. I really kind of respect what y'all do that, kind of deal with those people. But anyways, I had more of a personal question. Y'all were talking about logic and kind of going through that, and it seems like from what I've seen of the show that you guys don't necessarily have your hand really in one basket, that you kind of see problems with religion, you see problems with human logic, that so you guys choose not really to believe in anything. Is that correct?
Well, I think all honest people realize that no knowledge is absolute.
And so kind of going off that fact, this is more of a personal question of what makes you guys tick, and what is your driving purpose in life? Because if you don't necessarily believe in a higher God or a higher power, then what is it that, gets you up every day, and what drives you to come to the television studio and, share this experience and go on in life? Because, I come from a conservative Christian background. I respect, you guys' opinion. You guys, can believe what you wish. That is your deal. But, I personally believe that there is a God and that there is a heaven and hell and such as that. Mm-hmm. And from my point of view, if I were to see that, there was no God, there was no greater being, then I kind of see life as purposeless. And so I'm just curious what do you got? What makes you tick? What is the purpose that drives you guys every day?
Why do we come here and do this show?
Well, just why do we live? What's the point of life?
Life as an atheist?
Well, I mean, for that question, because it's fun, which is actually what I would answer to a lot of your questions, because I don't see why life is less enjoyable not thinking that there's a God involved. I mean, true, God serves as sort of security to people who can tell themselves, basically, well, I know I have a purpose because there is a guy telling me what my purpose is. Well, I mean, if that's all it takes, then I've got a boss who tells me, what to do in my job, and I make money at it. But in a more ultimate sense, not believing in God entails that basically people have to come up with their own purpose, and that's scary for people. But overall, I enjoy. I consider life to be an enjoyable experience. And if I were to just lay down and die and not experience anything, then that would be it. I wouldn't get to enjoy life anymore.
That would be much less enjoyable.
Yeah.
So
I think
we're a
I
bunch
can
of
rattle off
hedonists.
a list of things that I really like to do. I mean, I like to be on this show. I like to argue. I like to hear from people who have different opinions than mine and think really hard. I'm a video game geek. I like to play online games. I like watching movies. Sex is good. Good food is good. Lots of good stuff in life, and no particular reason why I should be bothered that somebody doesn't tell me what it's all about. I think life is about doing the stuff you enjoy and sort of figuring out what's going on as you go along.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think, I guess where I'm coming from is, I enjoy those things too. I enjoy, going to the lake.
So why would you not feel like you could go on living if you found out there was no God?
What's that question again?
If you found out that there was no God, let's say suddenly you were infused with the absolute knowledge that God really doesn't exist, then what?
Would you all of a sudden feel like life? Yeah, would you all of a sudden feel like life wasn't worth it anymore and now you have to kill yourself?
Yeah, would those things that I listed suddenly become less enjoyable?
Not necessarily. I think if something like that were to happen, well, I don't think that would ever happen, but if hypothetically it were to happen, then...
But you can imagine.
I can imagine. I honestly don't know what I would do. I think, I would still enjoy those things, but I guess more kind of the means to the end of that. Well, okay, I play a video game, I, really dedicate my time to that, and I win that video game, well, then what now?
Then you do
win that video
else.
game and me enjoying myself at the park and stuff like that, that's all good and fun, but there's no purpose to it. There's no...
There doesn't have to be. This is, if y'all saw, the recent Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie, where there was this great line, this great revelation in the middle, where they say candy doesn't have to have a purpose. It just is. But, I think the difference is if you all of a sudden were to have the knowledge that there is no God, the focus of your life would become now instead of becoming in the afterlife. You don't play World of Warcraft in the hopes that it might help you make a place for yourself in heaven. I hope.
I'd avoid you if you did. But I think that if you were to become an atheist, God forbid, you would go through the same thing that a lot of atheists go through, which is that they suddenly think, well, a lot of the things that I've lived my life for aren't actually real, so what do I do now? And then you would go into reading a lot about philosophy, like epistemology, and figure out what other atheists have said about the subject and what tends to work for people. And I tend to think that there is sort of a limited mortality in, a limited immortality in getting in touch with other lives around you and affecting them, so that a little bit of you is carried on in the people you get in touch with.
Hopefully infecting them in a positive way.
In a positive way, yeah. It's the quantum leap theory of philosophy.
Okay, and also, the flaw in using God as your justification to find reasons and meaning and purpose in life is that I think way too many people do things because they feel like that is the purpose that's been assigned to them. For example, way too many people get trapped into relationships. We have a mutual friend who's in a relationship with a girl that just doesn't spark him, but his parents approve of her. They're both at that time in their life where it's appropriate to settle down and get married and have children.
And he's Catholic.
And he feels like he has.
She's the same ethnic background as him.
Exactly.
But he's not that into her, as far as I can tell.
He's not that into her, but he's not getting any younger, and at some point he's going to have to get married and have children and marry a Catholic woman who's the same ethnic background, because that's what you do. If you were to give up that assigned value in life, you might be able to figure out for yourself what is actually meaningful to you.
Have you guys ever tried out theism?
Tried what?
Like
Deism?
Have you ever tried theism, like Christianity or Islam? Have you ever investigated those ventures yourself personally?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
We've checked them out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Read the Bible.
And nothing.
Nothing.
No.
Nothing really.
No, it doesn't make as much sense to me. I mean, I can respect some of the concepts that are involved in them, and I can understand why other people find them meaningful. But for me, I just don't feel like I need it to find meaning in my own life and to find purpose and value in the life that I have without finding some kind of external purpose.
So you'd say the purpose of your life would be to just enjoy yourself?
Yeah, but with the caveat that there are other people in the world who also deserve to enjoy themselves and not go out of your way to step on things that would make other people's lives worse.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so you believe that as long as you're not hurting anybody with what you're doing, then it's just fine that you lead life the way that you choose.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Definitely. Well, that answers some question. I appreciate your time.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks for calling.
Yeah, you have a good one.
You too. Feeling warm and fuzzy on this show today.
You always feel warm and fuzzy.
Are you calling me Harry? Sorry. Sorry.
I don't mean tactilely.
Okay.
Because I don't know.
Next caller.
Okay. What do we got? Peter.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Hi,
Hey.
Peter.
Hey, I have a few questions. You feel warm and fuzzy, just might keep it going.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do you guys believe in love?
Love?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, but you also understand that you can't physically see love.
Sure you can.
You can see love.
Yeah. You watch two people who are in love, it looks
And
very
you cannot
different.
see. What does love look like?
You watch two people who are in love, it looks very different from two people who aren't in love. You see visual evidence of that love.
You can also experience the difference in their pulse and the difference in their body heat and the difference in the
If you want to get all medical
pheromones that are
about it,
coming out of them. So
I mean, love is stuff that happens in your mind, and I think it's pretty well established that we have minds and stuff happens in them.
Correct, but also, from a evidence or scientific standpoint, can you see love?
We just gave several
Yeah.
examples of how you can.
you really can. I mean, you can. There's different ways that you can scientifically test the difference in the size of somebody's pupil and the difference in their heart rate and respiratory rate when they're experiencing love, and the difference in what their pheromones are doing.
Okay.
Yeah, and I should mention that there are what?
Is there a difference between love and care?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so if you care for someone, I mean, I don't know if you guys see where I'm trying to go with this, but if
I think I do.
You don't have, proof that God exists, and I was just trying to bring up a point that, well, for me at least, I really don't have any physical proof besides from what you feel. And
Yeah.
some people believe that they feel Jesus, or they believe they feel.
Well, the
Right,
thing is,
which is just as good as the. I mean, you can prove that somebody believes in God, or at least not prove, because as Keryn keeps saying, you can't prove anything, but you can see evidence because people behave differently when they believe in God than when they don't. But the same is also true of fairies.
Yeah.
People who believe in fairies might be more inclined to clap when the appropriate line shows up in Peter Pan. But that doesn't mean the thing they believe in actually exists outside their head.
Right. Well, and not only that, but you're not a scientist, and neither am I. But there are a lot of people out there. If you're interested in the subjects, there's a lot of stuff available on the internet. That a lot of scientific studies have been done on testing the brain waves and the chemical functions that are going on during certain experiences of emotion. There have
I'm
been
not really very interested. I'm changing to the channels like the guy said. I'm watching football. I see you guys, and I think it's pretty interesting.
You were trying to make a point, but I mean, it was a good point. I know that it's not what you were intending, but it's, there have been scientific tests that show the difference between the chemical difference in the part of the brain that functions differently between lust and love, and between love and care, and also between if you're equivocating this to belief in God. I mean, there are some scientific tests that have been done to show that there is something called the God center of the brain, which predisposes you to believe in stuff like that. So, I mean, I know that that's not what your point was, but...
Yeah. I mean, I had a few other questions. I enjoy, talking to people with different beliefs, or just finding out what other people think.
Okay.
Would you guys have problems with kids saying prayers in school?
Yes.
Wait a minute. Would I have a problem with kids saying prayers in schools, or would I have a problem with teachers saying, "Okay, kids, let's all pray now"?
No, let's say, okay, I'm from West Texas, so sort of like that. And at the beginning of the class, it was just understood that, okay, maybe, we say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we say maybe a prayer or something like that.
How did it get to be understood? Did the teacher say that?
Well, I probably did,
Well, then I'm not into that.
Right.
I'm not into that because it's somebody who's acting on behalf of a government organization, basically dictating what it is that kids do at that time that happens to be involved with a religion that not everybody agrees with.
Right. Well, see, my problem with prayer in schools is, I don't have a problem with people praying. I don't have a problem with kids coming to school a couple minutes early and having a little prayer group on school grounds. I don't have a problem with parents teaching their kids about religion. What I have a problem with is I don't really see a point to using class time that are paid by tax dollars during structured time during a certain part of the school day to make everybody pray. There's no point to it. If you want your kids to pray, you tell them to pray. You have them pray before school, during the lunch break, during recess, after school. In fact, if they're sitting at their desk and they're about to take a test and they silently say to themselves, "Please God, let me get an A on this test," I don't have a problem with that either. But I do have a time.
It won't affect their test, but they can do it.
I don't believe it'll affect their test. But I do have a problem with them wasting school hours to enforce something upon everybody that not everybody agrees with, believes in, and isn't really constructive towards the educational process.
Okay. Last question. Okay. I believe you guys asked this question. What if you all of a sudden had all knowledge and were all knowing? You found out that God was real. I mean, how would you guys feel about that?
I would have a lot of questions for God. Like, did you really do all that stuff in the Bible? Like, send 2 bears to rip apart 42 children because they called a guy Baldy? Knowing that God exists doesn't automatically mean that you have to approve. We've lost Peter. Sorry about that. Knowing a God exists doesn't automatically imply that it's worthwhile to worship this thing. It would sort of be like, there's a guy on named Star Trek. There was a guy on Star Trek called Q who had omnipotent powers. And he's sort of like what God might be, except he was a jerk. And the question is, if you find out Q exists, would you worship him? I think, well, if you knew what's good for you, you might, but that wouldn't mean that it's the right thing to worship him.
Are you going to plug the debate?
Oh, yes. I'm going to remind everybody out there that there's a very important event coming up on Tuesday. There's a debate over, is there an afterlife? Taking the con side will be ACA's own Paul Wilson, and taking the pro side will be a Catholic theology student. This will occur at 7:30 p.m. in the Alamo Draft House, but I've hopelessly buried the notes on which Alamo Draft House. Here it is. Alamo Cinema Draft House, South Lamar. So look that up, and that's on Tuesday at 7:30, and it should be a heck of a lot of fun.
Okay.
So we're going next to Justin.
Yes, I was calling because I really don't have any questions, but I was going to make a statement about, I quit going to church a very long time ago, and about 5-6 years ago I had an ex-girlfriend that I dated for a long time. Finally talked me into going to church with her family, and I went into, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Black Sunday in the Episcopalian Church, and that's where, I'm not even sure exactly what it is, but everybody is supposed to wear black.
Okay.
Well, I show up, I'm wearing a black leather jacket and a black leather vest, and I've got, a black shirt, and I'm dressed in all black, but yet just because I wasn't in a black suit, everybody was staring at me, commenting, and that's the main reason right there I don't go to church. And I don't see the point as to why, like some people I know, will sit there and preach to you about this is wrong, as in the eyes of God and this and that, but yet I've known people that do that and go home and drink a fifth of whiskey at night.
Yeah.
And I cannot understand the point of why somebody, if you're going to have your beliefs or anything, I can understand maybe bring up a conversation, but don't sit there and try to hound them down on me if I don't believe in them. And this is the first time I watched your show, and I only wanted to bring this up and to make that comment for the Christians out there that are listening right now.
Yeah.
And that was only the really point that I had that I wanted to say, and I appreciate you letting me share my talking experience with you.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling.
All right, thank you.
Of course, they won't listen because the Bible specifically instructs people to go out and make more Christians.
Right.
Which is why they do that to you.
I guess I have just two reactions, to that. I thought it was a good point. That being that, Christians try to preach that you shouldn't judge. It's only God's place to judge. But so many, and not just Christians, so many religious people in general, use their religion and their religious beliefs and their religious background as a way to shun other people, and it's not good. And we actually
not all of them do that.
Not all of them do that.
But a lot do.
But a lot. That's why I said a lot of people use it that way, and it's hypocritical and non-constructive. But I was in a temple once, and it wasn't my temple. I want to say it was like in California with our family. But the rabbi brought up a really interesting question that he discussed with the congregation during the service, that he was saying, do you have an opinion over whether or not people should dress a certain way when they go to church? A lot of people dress up to go to church. My response to this question was, I don't think anybody should be forced to dress up when they go to church, but I think that when you're going to church, you want to make it feel special to you. And most people go through their days people who work at IBM, wearing, ratty T-shirts with holes in them and slack pants and Birkenstocks with white socks on, and they and dressing up, for us when we were children, dressing up was an event. It was fun. You get all glammed up, you wear your nicest clothes, you put on your makeup, you do your hair all special. You feel special. You walk into church feeling special. On the other hand, if you're a business executive who wears business suits and ties all week, every day on their job, wearing another business suit on a Saturday or a Friday or whenever you practice the Sabbath is not going to make that statement. It's going to make it feel formal and stuffy because that's what you've been doing all week. I have no problem with a business executive wearing slacks and a T-shirt and sandals to church on a Sunday because that's what makes their Sunday feel special and unique to them. Feel like it's a separate special time of their week that they've set aside to be restful.
Okay.
Okay. So those are my reactions. I don't think you should judge people on what they're wearing because if they decided to go to church, whatever they wore to church was, probably based on some sort of intent, whether or not it's to feel comfortable or to feel special.
Well, on the one hand, I guess churches have the right to decide their own dress code. On the other hand, churches also try to get their members to go out and drag little unsuspecting non-Christians in so that they can be converted. And I would say you can't really have it both ways, because if you want to be inclusive of everybody, then you can't be all nitpicky about whether they agree with your dress code or not.
Right. If you want somebody to join your religion, you're not going to scrutinize their outfit when they walk in the door.
Right. There's all that stuff about Jesus hanging out with sinners and whores and stuff.
Yeah.
So what would Jesus do? I don't know. I don't even know if he existed, and I don't much care what he would do. But for you who are into what Jesus would do, you might want to think about that. Next we go to Dinah. Did I get your name right?
Dana?
Oh,
Dinah.
Dana.
Dana. It's spelled wrong.
See, it's not my fault. It's the person
That's
who wrote your
okay.
name.
It's my accent.
Okay.
I get it all the time. I'm very spiritual. I am very questionable about the Bible. It's very dogmatic, and there's a lot of hatred in it. Mm-hmm. But I believe in Mother, Father, God, and Great Spirit, and I practice spiritual principles. And I'm constantly requesting things from God. Like about a month and a half ago, my godbrother was out shooting dope, and I got out in the streets and asked God if it be His will for me to find him, and I did. And I'm wondering, is this the universe, in your opinion, giving me my request, or is this? How do you explain that?
Well, I got to ask you, do your prayers have a 100% success rate? I mean, do you ever pray for something that you don't get?
What was the situation? I'm sorry, you answer his question first.
Okay. No, my prayers aren't 100%. Well, I mean, if I look at it long term, they are.
Well, do you keep track of the prayers that work out and the prayers that don't?
Yeah.
You do. So you have like a ledger somewhere that says, I prayed that my car keys would be found, and I didn't find them for a while.
I always even if I do lose my car keys, I'll stop and take a deep breath and ask God to help me find my keys, and I always do. I go into graveyards and people with elder people.
Well, I mean, that's funny because I lose my car keys sometimes, and I don't ask God to find them, and I find them anyway.
Right. I mean, this again, going back to the topic at the beginning of the show, is a good example of the difference between a priori knowledge and a posteriori knowledge. I would say, as someone who subscribes to a priori knowledge, that the odds of you having found your car keys or having found whatever it was you were looking for in your example were pretty good. I mean, Austin's not that big. You probably know some common places, where people hang out. You probably have a good idea of where you could have put your car keys in the first place. I don't think the odds are that unrealistic that without any supernatural intervention you could have found them. A posteriori knowledge in your experience could have said to you, well, I had this experience and therefore that proves to me what it was I was trying to believe in.
There's something that skeptics like to refer to as confirmation bias, which means that if you believe that something is going to happen, then you're more likely to notice when it does happen than when you don't, than when it doesn't. Like, for instance, you could pray 100 prayers in a week, and half of them half of them have a success rate, and the ones that don't happen, you either don't give as much thought to, like, oh, well, I didn't find my car keys today, and then the next day you find them.
What about healing?
Or you just don't remember. What about healing?
Healing.
Like
yeah.
what?
No.
You mean like
somebody
you lay hands on someone that has a liver problem.
Well, for one thing, you can't see a liver problem, which means that it's really easy for somebody to say, I have a liver problem, oh, I'm all better now, and you would never know the difference. Jeff, who's one of the other co-hosts on the show.
What about somebody that has been diagnosed with, like, hepatitis C?
Doctors are wrong sometimes.
Wait, that's in here.
What?
I have that in here. Somebody can know something. It's under justified true belief. One implication of this definition is that one cannot be said to know something just because one believes it, and that belief subsequently turns out to be true. An ill person with no medical training but a generally optimistic attitude might believe that she will recover from her illness, but quickly. But even if this belief turned out to be true, the patient did not know that she would get well because her belief lacked justification.
Yeah.
It also goes on to say, even if somebody had medical knowledge, even if it was a doctor and they had some kind of health condition and they, based on their medical experience, believed that they were going to heal quickly, and they did happen to heal quickly, they didn't know that they were going to heal quickly. Okay.
Yeah, well, there's something that Jeff D. likes to bring up, which is Evander Holyfield. Are you familiar with him?
I think so. He's the power of the mind and thought.
Well, he's a boxer who got his ear bitten off by Mike Tyson, and he supposedly got healed of a heart condition of some sort by one of those big shots. I mean, Billy Graham, something like that. Put his hands on him and said, "Your heart condition is healed," and he got better, which is great. But it would have been so much cooler if he could have healed his ear. I mean, if he'd said, "I want God to heal your ear," and it grows back right there on camera. That would be pretty convincing. The interesting thing is that never happens. Something that's actually visual, which you would think is just as easy as curing a heart condition, has never been known to happen ever, which makes you kind of suspicious about the rest of the things which you can't actually have evidence for.
Also, if you're talking about something like cancer or Katrina or anything really, I mean, statistically, the number of people that were probably praying to survive that versus the number of people the number of people that prayed to survive it and did survive it versus the number of people that prayed to survive it and didn't.
You don't hear about the people dying that they were praying to God up until the last minute.
I have actually. I went to school as a social worker and wanted to focus on gerontology, and wasn't getting enough of it in my classes. So I went to the library and checked out a bunch of videos on death and dying and grief and loss and different stuff like that. And you actually get to see, when you're studying death and dying and grief and loss, videos of people who, there was one family, they were black, the mother had cancer, they were very, very religious. The mother and particularly her son in the family were just so convinced in their faith in God that they just knew that she was going to heal and get better. And they just kept knowing right up until the very end that God had a reason, God had a plan, she was going to heal and get better, that if they just prayed hard enough, she was going to heal and get better. And eventually this woman died. And this son who had strong faith was furious and confused and distraught because he had never even entertained the possibility that, sometimes prayer isn't going to make you heal and get better. So, I mean, plenty of people in the world can gamble on saying, oh, I prayed for this thing to come true and it did, and just completely ignore all of the people in the world that prayed for something to come true and it didn't. But it doesn't make it true.
Okay.
Doesn't necessarily make it false either. I'm not claiming that I know that there is no God and that I know that prayer doesn't work. But statistically,
but
it doesn't.
From a scientific point of view, there hasn't really been any good indication that prayer does anything other than make people feel better.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, there is also, the power, what I guess you were saying, willpower, the power of somebody to decide that they want to get better, decide that they want to stay alive.
Right.
The placebo effect is actually real.
Yeah.
You can give somebody a sugar pill and say, this is a pill that will cure your problems, and they will get better with a better rate than
had they not taken anything.
Right, because they believe that they get better, and things happen in your mind.
That, of course, also isn't foolproof.
True. But statistically, it has an influence.
So maybe the prayer is something that you're implementing in your mind.
Sort of like a self-fulfilled prophecy.
Giving you the placebo to believe whatever your mind believes.
It could be. I mean, if you think that God is now helping you find your car keys, you might be more observant and confident that you'll find them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, I appreciate y'all taking time out to talk with me, and send you love and light.
Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Right back at you.
Thanks. Peace be with you. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
Still feeling just all warm and fuzzy today.
Yes. This is going to be the last caller of the day, and he'll only have about 3 minutes because I have to remind everybody, debate on Tuesday, go to Dionysium.com, and also meet us at the Arboretum if you're interested in meeting us, not at the Arboretum, at Fresh Choice north of the Arboretum. Check out our website, which is up here, if you want a recap of any of these announcements. And we'll go to our last caller, which is going to be Ken.
Yes, I've often wondered why we when we come across primitive cultures, or we study primitive cultures, ancient cultures, that we see that they create gods to explain everything that they don't know, because man is apparently uncomfortable without not knowing certain things. Mm-hmm. So things that they don't yet know, they create gods for, but we don't see ourselves as doing the exact same thing. And as far as that 50-50 thing that you were talking about, well, not the 50-50 thing, but the prayer doing anything, football games are a real good example. Both teams pray, they win the game. Half the time, half the teams are wrong. Well, does that mean God doesn't like them? It means it's a random process,
Right.
Anyway, that's all I have to say about that.
Great.
Thanks for calling. Yeah, football games are a problem because you have to assume that the losing team didn't pray at all, which I doubt. And even worse, does God micromanage the stock market? Because that must be a nightmare, because there's like millions of trades every single day, and I bet people on both sides of the trade are sometimes praying that the stock is going to go up or the stock is going to go down after they bought or sold.
Or the lottery. I mean, if you... So let's
that's a lot of stuff for God to do.
Let's say you buy a lottery ticket. I'm betting that maybe like 95% of the people that buy a lottery ticket are praying that they're going to win. And only one person is going to win, which means all the rest of the prayers went unanswered.
Right, and the guy who wins and didn't pray to God doesn't mention that on TV, which means, again, confirmation bias. You don't notice the people who God had nothing to do with.
Right.
So our show's wrapping up. TV at atheist-community.org is the address to write to if you had a question but you didn't manage to get on today. Next week, a reminder, we will not be going to Crescent City Beignets as they're going to be closing their doors. We're going to be going to Schlotsky's Deli on South Lamar. That's just over the bridge on the river. And
now
debate
after
on
the show,
Tuesday.
we're going to Fresh Choice. If you are atheist
Yes.
or atheist friendly, meet us there at about
there.
6:45. We'll be there. We'd love to meet new people.
We always love to meet new people. We're just so excited when people show up that we haven't seen before.
Yay, somebody new. I don't have to talk to all these boring other people that are always here. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so bye. Thanks to the boring people for making our show possible, and we'll see you here next week. Bye.